Two of my teachers asked me to stay after class. When the last student left, they exchanged a quiet smile, and that's when I realized, this wasn't about lessons in a textbook. This was about me. The classroom always felt different once the last student had gone. The hum of chatter would fade, the shuffle of backpacks and sneakers would disappear, and suddenly the air became still, almost heavy. That day was no different, except for the fact that I was the one asked to stay behind. "Could you hang back for a few minutes?" Ms. Hayes said, her voice calm, steady as always. Beside her, Ms. Larkin gave me the kind of smile that makes you pause, warm, a little playful, but impossible to read fully. I nodded, trying to sound casual, though my throat had gone dry. "Sure." One by one, the students filed out, chairs scraping against the floor in a disorganized chorus. Someone laughed in the hallway. The door closed, and silence settled like a soft blanket over the room. That was when I realized, it was just the three of us. Ms. Hayes leaned back against her desk, her hands resting lightly on the wood, the way someone might after finishing a long performance. She was the picture of composure, tall, poised, with an elegance that seemed effortless. Even her stillness carried authority. Ms. Larkin, on the other hand, perched on the edge of the front row, her arms folded loosely, as if she were waiting for something amusing to happen. Her hair caught the fading light from the tall windows, a shimmer of gold against the dusk. She glanced at Ms. Hayes, then back at me, and her smile deepened, like they shared a secret I wasn't yet part of. I swallowed, shifting in my chair. The room suddenly felt smaller, though nothing had changed. Maybe it was the way they were both looking at me, not as a student, not as a younger man fumbling his way into adulthood, but as someone who mattered. The weight of that attention was both comforting and terrifying. "You've been working hard here," Ms. Hayes said after a moment. Her voice was softer now, stripped of the formality she used when lecturing. "But we notice you hold yourself back." Her words hit me harder than I expected. She wasn't wrong. I'd always been the one to keep a safe distance, to watch more than speak, to hide uncertainty behind polite nods. But hearing it from her, it was like she'd seen straight through the careful mask I thought I wore. Ms. Larkin tilted her head, studying me in a way that wasn't unkind, but left me feeling exposed. "You don't give yourself enough credit," she added. "We thought maybe we could show you a different way." There it was, that smile again, exchanged between them. Not mischievous exactly, but knowing. As if they had already discussed this moment and agreed on its meaning. My pulse quickened. I tried to laugh lightly, though it came out uneven. "And what way is that?" Neither answered right away. Instead, they let the question hang in the air, thick and unresolved, while the last of the evening sunlight slanted through the blinds, painting long golden bars across the desks. The silence didn't feel empty. It felt deliberate. And for the first time, I wondered if this invitation wasn't about teaching at all. I sat there, my hands clasped too tightly in my lap, and tried not to fidget under the weight of their attention. What unsettled me wasn't anything they did directly, it was how naturally they carried themselves. Ms. Hayes was the kind of woman whose presence you noticed without her ever needing to demand it. She leaned back against her desk as though she owned not only the classroom but the air within it. The faint glint of her glasses caught the last trace of sunlight, but her eyes, steady, discerning, remained locked on me. There was no impatience in them, no judgment, just an unwavering focus that made me want to sit straighter, breathe deeper, and somehow be more. Ms. Larkin, in contrast, was harder to pin down. She perched on the edge of the nearest desk, one ankle crossed lightly over the other. Every movement seemed alive, even the casual way she brushed a strand of hair away from her cheek. She had this way of smiling, not a wide grin, but something subtler, that felt like a puzzle waiting to be solved. Where Ms. Hayes grounded the moment, Ms. Larkin added sparks to it. Together, they were a balance, calm gravity and restless energy, and caught between them, I felt as though I were standing on a bridge suspended over something vast. "You don't need to be nervous," Ms. Hayes said finally. Her tone was gentle, almost maternal, yet there was an undercurrent of something else, an encouragement that held weight. "I'm not nervous," I lied, my voice betraying me with the smallest crack. That earned me a soft laugh from Miss Larkin. Not mocking, more like she'd caught me in a harmless bluff. "You always say that," she murmured, as though she'd been keeping track. Her words made me blink. Always? Had she really been noticing me that closely? I shifted slightly in my chair, and in that moment, Miss Hayes moved closer, not abruptly but with a slow, deliberate step that drew her into my space. She rested one hand lightly on the edge of the desk beside me. Close enough that the warmth of her skin seemed to radiate into the space between us. "You hold back," she said again, her voice quiet but firm. "But you don't need to with us." The phrase "with us" caught in my chest. My eyes flicked instinctively toward Ms. Larkin, who was now leaning forward, elbows on her knees, her chin propped in one hand. Her eyes gleamed, catching the fading light. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to speak, but my throat locked. Instead, I found myself watching her hand as she idly traced circles on the desk's wooden surface. Her nails tapped softly, rhythmically, in time with the pounding of my pulse. The air was heavy with unsaid things. And though neither woman touched me, the closeness, the presence of them both, was enough to make every nerve in me alive with awareness. The silence stretched long enough that I finally shifted in my chair, unsure of whether I should speak or wait for them. That's when Ms. Hayes broke the quiet. "You've been careful with your words since the first day you came here," she said, her voice steady but not unkind. "Almost as if you're afraid of saying too much." Her observation landed squarely in the center of me. I opened my mouth, then shut it again. Careful, that was the exact word. I had spent years being careful, making sure I didn't come across too eager, too naive, too young. Ms. Larkin tilted her head, watching me the way someone studies a painting they're not finished interpreting. "Why is that?" she asked, her tone softer than usual, but still probing. "Why hide so much of yourself?" I tried to laugh it off. "I don't think I'm hiding. I just don't always know the right thing to say." She arched an eyebrow, amused, but not convinced. Miss Hayes, meanwhile, remained utterly still, her stillness itself felt like pressure. "No," she said quietly. "You know what you want to say. You're just afraid to say it." Her words stripped me bare. There was no easy answer. I dropped my gaze to the desk, tracing the faint carved initials left by generations of students. My chest tightened. "Maybe I am," I admitted at last. "And why?" Ms. Hayes asked. Her voice was firm, but not demanding. She wanted truth, not excuses. The question was so direct it left me no place to hide. My throat worked before any words came out. "Because I'm young," I said finally. The word tasted awkward. "You too," I hesitated, then forced myself to finish. "You're sure of yourselves. You walk into a room and people notice. You don't stumble. You don't hesitate. I don't have that. I feel like I'm always catching up." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Ms. Larkin leaned forward, resting her chin on her palm, her gaze locked on mine. "So you think that makes you less?" Her question caught me off guard. My lips parted, but no sound came. "That's what you believe," Ms. Hayes said, more as a statement than a question. Her hand moved, slowly, deliberately, and came to rest on the desk beside my arm. Not quite touching me, but close enough that the warmth of her skin seemed to seep into the space between us. "But you're wrong." Ms. Larkin's smile had softened now, stripped of its playful edge. "You don't realize how much people see in you," she said. "You think your hesitations make you invisible. They don't. They make you human." The words were disarming, almost too much to take in. I forced a weak smile, trying to lighten the air. "That's generous of you to say." But Ms. Hayes leaned in just slightly, her eyes unwavering. "It's not generosity," she said. "It's honesty." The weight of that truth left me silent, the room thick with something I couldn't quite name. And for the first time, I felt like they weren't asking me for the right answer. They were asking me to stop hiding. My confession seemed to hang in the air long after I spoke it. The words had slipped out too honestly, too raw, and now they sat there between us, impossible to take back. I expected one of them to move on quickly, to smooth over the tension with a change of subject. Instead, both women let the silence breathe. Ms. Hayes was the first to bridge it. She leaned forward just slightly, her expression unreadable but steady. Then, with a movement so calm it nearly startled me, she reached out and set her hand on my wrist. The touch was simple. Barely more than skin against skin. But the warmth of her palm, the steady weight of her fingers, carried a message that words couldn't. My pulse leapt beneath her touch, and I was suddenly aware of everything, the sound of the clock ticking on the wall, the faint creak of the chair beneath me, the way my breath quickened without my permission. "Steady," she said softly, though her tone wasn't commanding. It was almost reassuring. "You don't need to run from what you feel." The gentleness of her hand contradicted the firmness of her voice, and together they rooted me to the moment. I didn't dare move, didn't dare even blink. Then I felt another shift. Ms. Larkin, who had been sitting just to my right, slid a little closer on her desk's edge. Her knee brushed lightly against mine beneath the table. At first, I thought it was an accident, but she didn't pull away. She let the contact linger, deliberate, unhurried. It was such a small thing, her knee against mine, yet it sent a jolt through me sharper than if she'd taken my hand outright. My body tensed instinctively, but then the warmth of her nearness settled into me. She tilted her head, eyes glimmering with a quiet mischief, as if she knew exactly the effect she was having. "You think too much," she murmured. Her voice was low, intimate, like a secret past between only us. "You're allowed to just be here." Between Ms. Hayes's hand anchoring me and Ms. Larkin's subtle touch, I felt suspended in a strange, dizzy balance. Neither gesture was forward, not really. But they were unmistakably intentional. They weren't testing me with questions anymore, they were testing me with presence. I glanced between them, unsure if I should pull back, speak, or simply breathe. But Ms. Hayes's fingers tightened just slightly on my wrist, not enough to hold me in place, but enough to remind me I was wanted here. Her gaze never wavered, calm and steady. And Ms. Larkin, her smile softened now, no longer teasing. Her knee stayed pressed to mine, but the playfulness in her eyes had given way to something quieter. Something almost vulnerable. The touches were brief, subtle, nothing anyone else would have noticed. But for me, they carried the weight of an entire confession. And for the first time, I realized, they weren't just teaching me. They were letting me in. After those touches, the air between us felt charged, like the quiet hum before a storm. My thoughts scrambled, trying to make sense of what was happening, but then Ms. Hayes did something unexpected. She withdrew her hand slowly, not in rejection, but with deliberate care, as though she was teaching me that even endings could carry meaning. "Sit with us a moment," she said. Her voice was calm, almost meditative, and the way she phrased it wasn't a command but an invitation. Ms. Larkin shifted closer too, resting back against the desk, her legs still brushing mine lightly as though to keep me tethered. Neither woman asked me for words. They simply wanted me to stay. At first, the silence was unbearable. My mind raced with everything I thought I should be saying. Jokes to lighten the mood, explanations for my nerves, anything to fill the emptiness. But every time I opened my mouth, the stillness between them stopped me. They weren't looking for noise. They were teaching me how to be quiet without being absent. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, each second louder than it had ever been before. The fading light through the blinds cut across the desks in long stripes, painting the room in shades of amber and shadow. I could hear the faint hum of a vending machine down the hall, the distant footsteps of a janitor. Every sound became amplified in the stillness. Ms. Hayes's breathing was slow and measured, almost a metronome against the quiet. She sat composed, hands folded loosely in her lap, her posture both elegant and relaxed. She didn't look at me constantly, sometimes her gaze drifted to the floor, or to the window, but even then, I felt her awareness fixed on me. Ms. Larkin, meanwhile, was more openly present. She leaned forward, propping her chin on her hand, her elbow on her knee, studying me with eyes that didn't wander. Her gaze carried a question, though she never voiced it. Can you sit with this? Can you sit with us? I shifted in my seat, uneasy at first, but then something began to change. My shoulders lowered. The frantic need to speak started to fade. For the first time, I noticed the warmth of Ms. Larkin's sleeve brushing my arm, the faint perfume she wore, something floral, grounding. I noticed the steadiness of Ms. Hayes's presence across from me, like an anchor keeping me from drifting too far inside my own thoughts. And then, unexpectedly, the silence became comforting. It wasn't empty anymore. It was full, of attention, of patience, of unspoken trust. When I finally looked up, Ms. Hayes was watching me again. She didn't smile, but her eyes softened, approving. Ms. Larkin's lips curved faintly, as though she'd seen the shift in me and was pleased I hadn't run from it. I realized then that this was their lesson, that connection didn't always need words, or explanations, or the safety net of humor. Sometimes, it was enough to simply be. And for the first time in a long while, I let myself breathe into the quiet, and felt understood without saying a thing. The silence had settled into me so deeply that when I finally spoke, my own voice startled me. I should probably tell you something, I said, the words slow, halting. My hands rubbed together unconsciously, like I was trying to gather enough warmth to say the truth. Both women turned their attention toward me. Ms. Hayes didn't move, but her gaze steadied, sharpening just slightly, as if bracing herself for honesty. Ms. Larkin leaned forward, elbows on her knees, chin cradled in her palm. Her eyes were bright, curious, but not demanding. I swallowed hard. I've been holding back because, I hesitated, then let it out in one breath. Because I'm drawn to you. To both of you. Not just because you're beautiful, which you are, but because I feel safe with you. I feel seen. And I don't know what to do with that. The admission left my chest hollow, as though all the air had been emptied out of me. I braced for laughter, or a polite dismissal, or the awkward kindness people use when they want to let you down gently. But neither woman laughed. Instead, they exchanged a glance, long, quiet, filled with something I couldn't interpret. Then Ms. Hayes stood, not abruptly but with a composure that made the moment feel ceremonial. She crossed the short distance between us and rested her hand on my shoulder. Her touch was steady, warm, grounding. She looked down at me with eyes that carried no judgment, only weight. "Thank you," she said softly. For saying what most would have hidden. The sincerity in her voice nearly undid me. My throat tightened, but before I could answer, Ms. Larkin moved too. She slid closer, close enough that her knee pressed against mine again. Her hand lifted slowly, almost hesitant for the first time, and came to rest against my cheek. Her thumb traced lightly along the edge of my jaw, a touch so gentle it felt like it might disappear if I breathed too hard. "Do you know how rare it is," she whispered, "for someone your age to admit something like that without hiding behind bravado?" Her smile was tender now, stripped of all playfulness. "It's not weakness," she added. "It's courage." Between them, I felt anchored and exposed all at once, Ms. Hayes's hand steady on my shoulder, Ms. Larkin's thumb brushing my cheek. My heart hammered, my breath uneven, but I didn't pull away. For once, I didn't want to. "I don't want to make this complicated," I admitted, my voice unsteady. "I just wanted you to know." Ms. Hayes gave a small nod, her hand firm but reassuring. "Complicated doesn't scare us." And Ms. Larkin's smile deepened just slightly, her eyes holding mine as though she could read everything I hadn't dared to say. In that moment, I realized the lesson wasn't about confidence or presence anymore. It was about trust, the kind you only find when you step into the risk of being known. And I had just taken that step. When the moment passed, it wasn't with a grand gesture or a sudden shift, but with a kind of gentle easing, like a tide pulling back after a wave. Ms. Hayes withdrew her hand from my shoulder slowly, as if she wanted me to carry the weight of it even after she let go. Ms. Larkin's fingers lingered against my cheek for another breath, then trailed away with the faintest brush that left my skin tingling. The air felt lighter somehow, as if speaking the truth had unlocked something that had been tightly closed all evening. "Come on," Ms. Hayes said quietly. She reached for her bag from the desk, her movements graceful, deliberate. "It's late. Let's walk you out." Her tone wasn't final, but protective, like she wanted to draw a line under this moment before it became something it wasn't meant to be. Ms. Larkin slid off the desk and joined her, and together they flanked me as we moved toward the door. It struck me then how natural it felt, walking between them, like they had both claimed a place at my side without needing to announce it. The hallway outside was nearly deserted. Our footsteps echoed in the emptiness, the soft squeak of rubber soles on polished tile. The building smelled faintly of cleaning supplies and old paper, familiar and grounding after the intensity of the classroom. We didn't speak much as we walked. There was no need. The silence we had shared earlier carried with us, not heavy anymore, but warm, like a quiet understanding that didn't need words. Every so often, Ms. Larkin's shoulder brushed against mine as we walked, just lightly, just enough to remind me she was there. Ms. Hayes walked on my other side, a steady presence, her posture as calm as it had been all evening. When we stepped outside, the evening air hit cool against my skin. The sky had shifted to a deep indigo, streaked faintly with the last traces of sunset. The parking lot stretched out in front of us, mostly empty now, the lamplight casting soft circles on the asphalt. I paused, unsure how to say goodbye. Part of me didn't want to leave, another part feared overstaying, breaking the delicate balance we had built. I turned toward them, searching for words that wouldn't come. Ms. Hayes spared me the effort. She touched my arm, just briefly, just enough for me to feel the steady warmth of her hand through my sleeve. "You don't have to rush," she said. "Whatever comes next, let it come. Don't force it." Ms. Larkin leaned in then, closer than I expected, and pressed a soft kiss to my cheek. The touch was light, but it lingered in a way that made my breath catch. When she pulled back, she smiled, not teasing, not playful this time, but gentle, as though she were handing me something fragile to keep. "You're not walking alone anymore," she said simply. The words struck me harder than I thought they would. Because she was right. I wasn't. As I walked to my car, their presence flanking me until the very last step, I realized the lesson they'd given me wasn't about confidence, or silence, or even honesty. It was about belonging, finding it in unexpected places, and daring to let it matter. And with that, the night closed around us, not as an ending, but as the beginning of something I hadn't dared to believe was possible.